Hello and welcome to another Which Bookie YouTube preview. This time, again, I'm joined by Will Smith, but this time we're looking at the Epsom Derby. We're also going to look at the Oaks. So essentially, we're looking at the two-day Derby Festival fixture coming up Friday and Saturday. This has been recorded about lunchtime on Thursday. We'll get out as quickly as we can, and I will chapter the video at the bottom so you can see what you want to look at. The main focus is going to be the Oaks and the Derby. Then we will run through early thoughts on Friday and early thoughts for Saturday. As always, there's a link in the description for the Which Bookie tips page, our daily tips, where you'll be able to find out our final thoughts for myself and for Will across both days of the Epsom meeting. There may be some horses from other places as well. So make sure you check that out for essentially what we advise in the final stages of it. But for now, Will, I think we can get excited about, there's two big classics here. They both look like reasonably good renewals to my eye, in the fact that we've got some questions to answer. Sometimes you can get a year where you have a load of confidence. Doesn't always mean that you get it right, but sometimes it's hard to look at it without tunnel vision. This time round, I think the Oaks is more like that than the Derby typically is, but it still looks like it's a cracking renewal. So we'll get straight in with the Oaks if that's all right, Will. Desert Flower is heading the market as 13-8 favourite. We've got Mini Hawk in there for Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore as 9-2. Well for Aidan O'Brien and Wayne Lorden. Their second string is a 7-1 poke. We've got Giselle, Aidan O'Brien, Colin Keane, the third string, 17-2. And then it's 11-1 and bigger, the rest of those. The market would suggest, especially considering this is a classic and there's only so short they can get, that Desert Flower's pretty much unbeatable. I know it's a 13-8 poke and it's gamble responsibly and anything can happen type stuff, but she's one of the shortest priced Oaks fillies that I can remember for a while that looks like she's fairly bomb-proof. So do you see anything really challenging Desert Flower? Obviously, with quite a few runners and some reasonable prices in behind, is there like an each-way alternative against her, or are you keen to take her on full stop?
I think, I haven't sort of come down categorically on something just yet, but I think it is a race where obviously it's priced up currently on class and ability. And I mean that with a view to obviously mile and a half round Epsom. Sometimes you need to have a real stamina emphasis to the horse's ability as well. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes class gets you through the races and you find that 3-year-olds at this stage of the year, their class will win them the race. But then when they come up against stronger stayers later in the summer or later in their campaign, they get found wanting at that particular level. But certainly with Desert Flower, I mean, on her pedigree, how she goes through her races, she's not going to be at her best at a mile and a half. I'm quite categorical in saying that. Now, that might mean that she still is too good, because she's clearly very, very classy. And the interesting thing here with the Ballydoyle representatives, all three of them, Mini Hawk, Whirl and Giselle, on pedigree and the way they've gone through their races as well, you'd be slightly doubtful that they're, strong stayers at a mile and a half. But how many times do we see Ballydoyle horses who seem to outlast their pedigree in terms of stamina and their ability and their gutsiness and what have you? So it's a fascinating renewal, because I think tactically those at the top of the market wouldn't want it to be an absolute slogfest, out and out gallop, make stamina the main play. So and the ground will be an interesting factor as well. Just give a quick mention to that. It was updated at about 11:30 on Thursday and officially called good after most of the rain has gone through on Thursday. So there is still some rain about. There were worries that it might be turning soft, given they'd watered a couple of days ago and now had some rain. But officially it's described as good. So we're thinking it's going to be around that range, good to soft. If there is a bit of dig in the ground, the one horse that I thought is overpriced, quite clearly in my mind, is We Might Take the Long Way for Joseph O'Brien. Because if you look back through her form, she actually beat Mini Hawk in a Cork Maiden as a 2-year-old. And then she started her campaign this year with a really good run, I thought, at Leopardstown in the Ballysack Stakes against the boys, against the Colts. Delacroix won that race. And then she absolutely ran away with the Salsaville Stakes at Navan over 10 furlongs there, beating a nice horse of Paddy Toomey's, Catalina Del Carpio, who I think will be a group horse in waiting as we go through the summer. So she might be the potential each-way option here. We might take the long way, because I think she's a strong stayer. She'll like any dig in the ground, if there is any. And you'd imagine that she might be ridden with a view to making it a stamina test. And I think her ability is not too far behind the likes of Desert Flower and the Ballydoyle representatives. So Joseph O'Brien, might take the long way, is probably the each way option here at around about 16-1, I think.
I like that because there is that question mark about Desert Flower, of course, isn't there? But if the stamina is going to find her out, and like you say, it may just be that the class comes in that she won't do it. But it's very hard to ignore the fact that this is half a mile further, and there is no guarantee that she's going to stay when you try and dig as deep as you possibly want out of it. I think it's interesting with Elwitine being supplemented because I liked that Falakea that was already in here. They've decided to not run her. They want to run Elwitine. She's not exactly bred to be guaranteed to get the trip either, being like with her side being Debawi, but her running that 1,000 guineas wasn't bad. It was probably it was better than I was expecting for her, considering it was a sort of a second run, but her first like proper race really, especially when you're going into Group 1 standard. And I don't know what the record is with horses that get supplemented into like an Oaks or a Derby, but I don't think they're just doing it for the sake of having a runner. And as much as the breeding's not there to suggest that this one will stay, they obviously really do think that she will. But then you probably do beg the question, I know she'd only had one run before, but why wasn't she entered in the Oaks in the first instance if this was always sort of the plan? So I go back and forth on those ones, and then I don't want to find like a value loser as an each way alternative. So I don't know, I'm a bit confused with it. I think if Falakea was in this race, that would have been the horse that I would have been playing. The fact that they haven't put her in here and they've put Elwitine in makes me look at her a bit more than I probably should do. I do think Desert Flower is the one. It'll just be interesting to see what happens to the price. I'm kind of half hoping that she's weak in the market. And if she pushes herself out to closer to 2-1, or potentially even bigger than that, I think I would just take the risk that she might be good enough to win this. But as it stands at the moment, I don't know where I'd go in. It does look like it's going to be a pretty competitive renewal. I'm excited to find out how it happens, but yeah, hopefully Desert Flower is just an absolute aeroplane because good horses will win at all the distances regardless of their breed. And look at Tiger Roll, he was a flatbred and he won his nationals, didn't he? So it's not always the key.
Yeah, and class will always out generally. And I'd completely take that point with Desert Flower, definitely. I think with the Ballydoyle 3 as well, I wouldn't be cast iron guaranteed that Minnie Hawk, for all that she's the choice of Ryan Moore, that she's the best of them. I don't think there's much between them. And Whirl was really good at York. So, yeah, fascinating renewal. Desert Flower will probably be too good, probably too classy, and get away with the trip, I think is probably the best way of putting it. And then you'd see her in, some of those real good 10 furlong races, I think, as the season goes on. Probably the Coral Eclipse or something like that might be an interesting option for her.
Yeah, definitely. And then with those close Saturn ones, Ballydoyle ones, this will bring us nicely into the Derby as well. When you look at the pecking order of it, I did look at Colin King because he's been jocked up on the line in winter as well. He's only had a handful of rides for Aidan O'Brien in Britain, and they've all been sort of no-hopers. They've all been big prices. So even in this instance here, like Giselle, before she won her race this season, there were lots of comments from Aidan O'Brien saying that she desperately needs it. It's just a short price, so that's what it's going to get into like a little fiddly affair or whatever. But I mean, like, she couldn't have done any more than she possibly did. And I don't see how, I know Ryan Moore knows the horse is better from working him at home and things like that as well. But for a horse that's quite buzzy, had to wear a hood, it may just be that the deciding factor for him not riding her, and the same with Wayne Lorden as well, is just they're like, well, if she is a horse that's a bit temperamental, then we'd rather go for one that's got a better temperament. But she definitely looks like she's got as much ability as the other two as well. So that's what's nice about these races, isn't it? We'll find out the pecking order, hopefully, unless we get another horse that falls out the stalls and we can use that as an excuse for why they get beat. But we're not going to wish for that to happen. We'll move on to the Derby, Will, before we reflect back on anything else from Friday, if we fancy anything there. Of course, the draw came out yesterday and lots of talk was about the fact that, well, basically all of the Ballydoyle horses are drawn fairly high, but the Lion in Winter is right out on the outside, isn't he? He's obviously third string on jockey bookings, as we've just quickly talked about in pecking order for the Oaks. But the betting as it stands at the moment is Delacroix's 3-1 favourite. Ruling Court, the 2,000 guineas winner, is 7-2. It's 5-1 for Pride of Arras. We've got Lion in Winter in it, big as 9-1, but short 6-1. Demasis is 12-1. Lambourne's 12-1 as well. Then it's 16-1 or bigger the rest. So, Will, I think a lot, especially after the draw, I think a lot of people looked at Lambourne, the fact that he's not the first string because Ryan Moore was always going to ride Delacroix, I suppose. Well, they said that in recent weeks. But he's got quite a good draw, isn't he? He's not the last of the pecking order, but from a betting perspective, he was a big price. So he feels like he's the obvious shortener. He's as short as 7-1 in places. And like I say, top price at the minute is 12-1. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts on him because you're very good at spotting a bit of value in the market, and especially those each way type play ones. with a horse like Lambourne, I'm guessing you can see the case that's made for him as an each-way player, especially in the pecking order, etc.
Yeah.
He's definitely getting too short, though, isn't he? Or is he not?
I mean, it's hard to say for sure. We know he'll stay because he obviously stayed the Chester Vase trip well. But he beat, horses that you'd think. I mean, Lazy Griff, if you like Lambourne, then Lazy Griff has to be a massive each-way price as well, doesn't he? Because he, by all accounts, was going to come on massively for that particular run. But I think with that in mind, that might make you feel the form isn't particularly strong in relation to all the other horses that he's taking on here. So I think the draw is a fascinating factor because of the presence of pretty much most of the fancied horses in high boxes. They're all 12 and higher, if not probably 14 and higher. Look at Delacroix 14, Damasus 15, Pride of Arras 16, Lion and Winter 19. So it's going to be an interesting race, and it's going to be defined, I think, by those horses out in the wider boxes. Now, a wide box doesn't hinder you necessarily over the Derby trip because actually there's that dogleg turn to the right as you come out of the stalls first, and then you climb uphill, don't you? So you can actually get to the first sort of turn on the inside, but then obviously you then sweep back round to the left. So you want to get in a position where you're not making your ground up the hill after that first dogleg turn. So actually being in a high box might not be too much of a bad thing. But probably what you don't want to be is on either extremity, because then you're stuck out on a limb either way and you're not going to be able to get in. So the fact that the Ballydoyle horses are out wider, generally they're the ones that shape how the race is run, aren't they? So I wouldn't mind betting that we get a good solid pace from those outside boxes, which will bring in the likes of Pride of Arras and Damasus. And Damasus is the one that wherever, if you take draw out of it completely, on what he did in the Dante, I thought he was really an interesting proposition here because he was very, very keen as well. And he stuck on, quite nicely in a better fashion than the Lion of Winter obviously did. You'd think that the Lion of Winter probably has a bit more scope to improve from what he did that day. But Damasus also came out of the Sandown Classic trial that I think is a half decent race as well. And because he's that keen going type, he's had 2 runs to settle him down. I think he's a real live player here at the prices, Damasus. If you can get those sort of extra places, 4, maybe even 5 on the day, I don't know how most bookies would be looking at it. And sort of 12 to 1 about Damasus. I think by association, he's going to be dragged into the race from his draw by the Ballydoyle contingent. And I think he's a real player because I think he'll improve quite nicely on that Dante run.
Oh, I like that. So I did see quite a few people talk about him, and I saw a few people that were disappointed with the draw for him as well. It sort of tempered enthusiasm a little bit for some of those horses. Like with him being a bit keen, the Lion and Winter in that Dante, they did try and settle him, didn't they? And they didn't really succeed. I suppose they didn't really succeed. Like it was an okay preparation run, but from that wide box, when we talk about the fact that you can sort of get to that inside part. You'd think that Colin Keane's going to be instructed to not try and send him on and get there, and they're going to have to just hope that the fortune sort of unfolds after, because I'd be staggered if they sent him off in front and then trusted that he would settle. But I do think if they did do that, sent him off and just think, you know what, he's in the Derby, we've got one chance, he's not prepped very well for it, we might as well have a see if we can have a go at it. If they did manage to get him to the front and then he did settle off the front, like in running, I think he'd be going relatively short in there. So I haven't completely and utterly lost faith in the Lion and Winter. But I feel like potentially, like most other people, the people that liked him last season have probably already got Derby tickets on him anyway. The fact that he's getting to a much bigger price now than he has been anti-post wouldn't lure me in to think, I need to top up. I'd just be like, well, at least my bet's not completely dead and buried. But like I say, the jockey selection stuff's hard because Wayne Lorden rode this horse on debut. I remember watching that, and as soon as I watched that, it was one of those where I thought, like, he does look like a classic horse. Then his Aiken win was phenomenal as well, wasn't it? But it's like that, like. Ryan Moore's obviously chosen Delacroix, but they did say after the Dante it wasn't a complete and utter foregone conclusion. They weren't completely disappointed with the Lion and Winter. But the fact that Wayne Lorden's not picked him then starts to ring a little bit of alarm bells in my mind. For all that sounds rude, but I think Colin Keane is a better jockey than Wayne Lorden is in terms of like where you'd rank them if it was outside of the yard. So I find it very difficult. I think the Colin Keane booking's interesting. I think he's definitely got a chance. It just makes me get really negative about Delacroix because it just makes me feel like if he was the one for Ballydoyle, we wouldn't have even been having this conversation about the Lion and Winter over last year or at the beginning of the season or worried about his prep or seeing what he did in the Dante. And I know he didn't I know he didn't win the Danny. He still stayed on towards the end when he wasn't really asked. It was a bit of a bunch finish, wasn't it? But had he have won that and Ryan Moore was riding him, nothing would have changed in what Delacroix's done, except the fact that he'd be a far bigger price. And people would say, well, actually, maybe he's not the best horse that's in the yard. And I don't think he is the best horse in the yard. He could prove me wrong, but at 3-1, he's far too skinny to do that. Ruling Court's the one that just, I know he's obvious because he's like right up there. I think he will go off favourite in this race, but he was good in that 2,000 guineas. He is the highest rated horse in here. And he is I think he is the mould of a horse that will just progress forward. The fact that he is stepping up in trip. And I know people will say again with him, he's in the breed and it might not 100% be in there. But when he got beat in that Acomb, it was good to firm ground. It was a course record for juveniles that the Lion of Winter did that day. And he just looks a little bit tap for toe. But I mean, most horses would when they're behind a horse like the Lion of Winter. His other runs that have been on good ground have all been fine. But it is going to be a little bit slower than, well, definitely be slower than the Acomb run, but it'll be a little bit slower than it was in the Guineas as well. And I think that will probably help him. That the fact that as much as they're going to go a bit fast, he's gone as fast as he possibly could in that Acomb, and he was still right there and only beating a couple of lengths. Whereas in this instance, over the trip that this is, I just think he's got everything in his favour to put in a massively big bold show. And I know Field of Gold wasn't given the best ride in that 2,000 guineas. I don't think it made a difference, to be honest with you. There was enough time for when he did get asked to pick him up if he was that good, and potentially from where the draw sat, him and Rawdon Court were both in the same. Him, Rawdon and Court were both in the same position, being drawn high. I know they were ridden slightly differently in the race, but I think it possibly inconvenienced both. So I think towards the front of the market, like Rawdon Court would be the one that I think deserves to be favourite in it. I do like what Pride of Arras did, and I do rate Demissus, but I don't know whether that Dante form is really that good. I think if the Lion in Winter was himself, he would have slammed him. And then those other ones might look as like, all right, each way alternatives, but I don't think they'd be on our mind for actually winning the race. So with all of that said, I think Rawdon Court should do this. I'm a tiny bit worried that we know the Guineas weekend when Godolphin was winning everything and Charlie Appleby was winning everything. That feels a long time ago now in terms of like form of them just smashing everything. If they were trained by Ed Walker, you'd be saying, well, they're definitely going to go in at the moment. And that is quite a big thing when it comes to the flat, isn't it? That, you know, trains can go in out of form. Like Charlie Appleby couldn't buy a winner, like a Group 1 winner like last season, but they're obviously coming into better form now. I think Rawdon Court would be the one I'd want to side with. Yeah. There's always something at a stupid price, though, Will. So would you say that Lazy Griff that's 150-1 through that line with Lambourne, he might be the one at an absolute stupid wild price that could grab a place? Possibly.
There's actually another one in the same yard that if it did happen to get very soft, and that's probably the only sort of situation where I would, be relatively keen to suggest this in any way, is Green Storm. You can actually get 250-1 about, which is pretty extraordinary. Because for all the world, to me, he's a soft ground grinder, but he's quite a good one. He's one of those that is probably going to win a Group 3 mile-and-a-half, mile-and-three-quarter race at some stage. And I don't think he's been seen to best effect on a couple of occasions, actually, his last few starts. At Newmarket last back end in the Zetland Stakes behind Stars in Their Eyes, which is pretty decent form. He did way too much on probably the wrong part of the track into a headwind that day. And he just ended up fading late on, which was fine. He gave Tennessee Stud a decent lead into the Criterium de Saint-Cloud and wasn't beaten far by him. And then he started this season back at Newmarket again in the Fielden Stakes. And again, you can mark up what he did that day because he was away from where the main action unfolded. And for all the world, he's a soft ground galloper. To me, Green Storm. And I think if he gets those kinds of conditions, he's the type of horse that will just keep on galloping. And if there are one or two that, have sort of stamina doubts or perhaps have gone a bit too hard too early from a wide draw, say, I can see him outrunning the price. He might be the sort of Hu Yamal or the ammo horse that finished in the frame at a big old price as well. He might be that horse this year, Green Storm. But the proviso is you'd have to have real soft or heavy ground, I think.
I like that. And I think it's always worth looking away from the front of the market in the Derby because it's hard to do that sometimes with all the hype that comes from the sort of the previous season and things like that as well. But all of the horses towards the head of the market that I feel like have a genuine chance will have to be ridden to have their best possible chance. They can't just sit back and just hope that the race unfolds for them. And in doing that, of say there's 5 that have got genuine clear-cut chances, 3 of them won't have it run to suit because they'll be competing for the same sort of positions. And you see it year after year, don't you? The first 5 in the betting, invariably, a few of those are way down the field just because on the day it just didn't happen for them. And then that brings in the cases for those bigger priced ones. And then you never know, get all 5 at the front of the market to flop because there's not, I wouldn't say there's definite reasons for it, but stamina, pecking order, all that sort of stuff. You could see a few at the front of the market not being in the frame, and then something's got to fill it. So 250 to 1. Let's get that on the thumbnail wheels when that goes in.
We'll be doing a rain dance if we've got that. We'll be doing a rain dance.
Well, that's it. We'll see what it is because there was lots of forecasts on BBC forecast. It looked like it was an absolute deluge, but they think it's just going to be on the soft side of good, don't they?
I think so. I mean, that's probably what they'll want to describe it as, because they were watering a couple of days ago, so they wouldn't want to have too much rain and then have that egg on their face. So who knows? I probably wouldn't make a real judgment until we actually see the first couple of races, I think.
Nope. But the good thing is, especially with a horse like that, you can, with some firms, you can get the extended places. So as much as at the moment it's a quarter of the odds for 4, and a lot of places, well, there's one place doing 5th. We might get some of those. You can slide them, can't you? And you can do the extended places, or you can just back horses to have like a top 10 finish or something. If he's 250 to 1 in the outright market, he's probably still going to be a massive price just to even finish in the top 10. And like I say, there will be a number of horses that try their best to run a race. That gasses them out and means that they don't actually run up to potentially the level they could have done had they been ridden more conservatively. Horses like that are definitely be ridden to pick up the pieces, aren't they? Because you'd rather come 18th of 19 in a Derby than 19th of 19. So as long as someone else thought as they're happy. So I quite like that, Will. Right. You're very good with Friday's card, I think, Will. We did talk before we came on the recording to see what we fancied from somewhere else. I got a couple of reasonable fancies for Saturday. I need to go back and do some more work on Friday stuff. So rather than waffling like I like to do for the sake of it, I'll remind everyone again, you can click the link in the description for our final tips. I'm sure there'll be a few bets from myself on Friday, but there'll definitely be some from Will. So if we move back to Friday, Will, I'll essentially hand the floor to yourself. 130 is the first race, and it is a listed stake. Then we've got the Woodcut Stakes, the Coronation Cup in there. We've already talked about the Oaks, and then there's a few handicaps. So if I hand it back to you, Will, in the first race, was there one you were interested?
Yeah, there was, and a few people have been interested in the few hours as we speak, actually, just now as well, because he's gone clear favourite now and by a margin. It's Diego Ventura, getting to a price now that is probably just skinny enough, really, for Wathnan Racing. But he's a horse who, for me, he's crying out for a sort of well-run 7 furlongs, perhaps even up to a mile as well. He looks like, despite being by Memas out of a Kodiak mare, you'd think that's all speed, but to me, he looks like a real grinder, actually. And he benefited from a brilliant ride from Christophe Soumillon to win a listed race over at Longchamp just under a month or so ago, where he sat close enough to a runaway leader that he was able to run that horse down, but not go too quick too soon. And that was in first-time cheap pieces, and they're retained, which I think is a bonus. But it's probably more relevant piece of form the one before, the King Charles II listed race at Newmarket, which Cosmic Year won. Now, I think Cosmic Year probably wasn't seen absolutely to his best at the Curragh behind Field of Gold, but he still was a really good second, very, very high-class horse on his day. And Diego Ventura kind of made up his ground wider away from Cosmic Year and the main action on that day at Newmarket. He seems to handle the ups and downs of Newmarket, Diego Ventura. So Epsom, I think, should be fine for him. And I just think he's clear best in this field. I think he's better, than most of the horses he takes on here. So he's absolutely the rightful favourite. What I think I'd probably be looking to do now is double him up in an each-way double with a horse in the Woodcut at 205. Havana Hurricane for Eve Johnson-Horton, who's always popping up each season with a classy bunch of 2-year-olds, isn't she? And 1 or 2 of them are pretty decent. She won this race a couple of seasons ago, of course, with Chipotle, I think it was, wasn't it? And Havana Hurricane was nothing but impressive at Goodwood, I thought, on his racecourse debut. Very, very well backed late on. Travelled nicely through that race, but came off the bridle early enough to think that stepping up to 6 is going to be of real benefit. And looking at his pedigree, that would absolutely be the case and borne out as well. And I think that was a good piece of form. I think that there's much more to come from him. Having handled Goodwood on debut, you'd think Epsom should hold no No Fears. And I think some of those, the likes of Norman's K and Maximised, they're priced up a bit more on sort of potential as opposed to substance. They both won their races, but I think there's been much more from Havana Hurricane in terms of what he's done. So that's probably the play at the minute. Havana Hurricane in the Woodcut at 205 and Diego Ventura in the Surrey Stakes at 130 in terms of an each way double to hopefully get things off to a positive note early on the day at Epsom.
Oh, I like that. So Diego Ventura, I mean, he is shortening up, but he's still 9-4 available, and that would be the 3 place up for grabs. And Havana Hurricane is 7-2 as well. So the place part of both of those will pay reasonably anyway, won't it? And then, of course, they will both win, or fingers crossed they do. Both got good chances. That's a nice way to kick off the day. Anything else in the other ones? Because obviously the Coronation Cup's a bit lopsided with Calandagan in there, but he is good. It's good to see him come over, right?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, on his day, exceptionally classy horse, isn't he, Calandagan? What he did at Royal Ascot last year was breathtaking. I think he'll probably win, but I think Jan Bruegel as second favourite is probably vulnerable. He's priced up there on account of who trains him, which is a relevant factor because, of course, Hayden O'Brien improves these types of horses year in, year out, doesn't he? But I think he'd have to, because not completely sold on the 3-year-old staying form last year that Jan Bruegel was the main sort of advertiser of. And he didn't sparkle, did he, on his seasonal debut? Now, he wouldn't be the first Aidan O'Brien horse, of course, not to sparkle on seasonal debut and then go and improve a stone and a half next time out. We've seen that plenty, haven't we? But I thought Giavolotto, in a market, there aren't too many options available right now, but in a market without Calandagan, given the fact that Giavolotto is third favourite in here and a good few points higher than Jan Bruegel, I thought he'd be an option to chase home Calandagan in that market without the French trained favourite. Because Giavolotto, I think, is a really good 1.5 mile horse waiting to happen off a solid tempo. He was campaigned as a stayer, wasn't he? But I think he's got that inherent cruising speed, that inherent ability, and when he comes off the bridle, he finds, that there's plenty under the bonnet, which he did do when he won the mightily valuable Hong Kong Vase back in December. He then went to a similarly valuable Dubai Shima Classic, of course. Now that developed into a sprint and he was too far back, and you can forgive him that run. But he wasn't too far behind Calandagan, to be fair. So that kind of puts him in the right kind of ballpark. And I would think that he should be a good bit shorter to Jan Bruegel in the betting compared to what he is. So he's going to probably be a play for me in that market without in the Coronation Cup.
Oh, I quite like that, because I like Jan Bruegel as a horse, but I remember when he won at Goodwood and he did everything wrong and won, and I just thought to myself, this is a superstar stayer. He's just an absolute weapon of a horse. And then I feel stupidly, but I stupidly just sided against him in the St. Leger. And then when he won, I was like, well, I knew he was quite good, but he gets sweaty, doesn't he? He can be really keen. They obviously rode him last time out in a similar fashion of, like, he did all the things wrong, but they still probably would have wanted to get more cover than they did, and they still had to ride him fairly prominently. You just feel like in a race like this, he's going to make sure that it is a decent gallop, which would help Giavolotto, because sometimes in these races when they come a bit more fiddly, he might not have as much speed as some of the other ones in there. But you are right, when he was campaigned as a stayer, he did look like dropping back and Trip was going to suit. And it's not often that they admit defeat and do that, is it?
No, not so early in a career, generally. No. And I think there will be a solid tempo in here, because Continuous is probably his pacemaker, Jan Bruegel's pacemaker, I'd suggest. An Ancient Wisdom, the Godolphin horse, he pretty much knows one way of going as well, which is fairly prominent. So I think it will be a solid tempo, definitely. And I think that will really suit Giavolotto. I think he's been slightly overlooked.
Oh, nice. So that's of the non-handicap action. There's a few handicaps on day one. Was there anything in any of those that caught your eye?
Yeah, in the 315, the last two handicaps, I haven't really found an angle as yet. Hopefully there might be at some stage. But the 315, over 10 furlongs, classy sort of open-ended handicap as such. But sometimes these races are chock full of horses, because they're the all-aged handicaps. You find horses that are perhaps just a bit... not exposed is probably the wrong word, but they've reached a level and they don't have much juice left in terms of massive improvement. So you need to find a horse that is is suited to the particular test. I think that this will bring, and on a potentially upward curve at this stage of the year. And there were two at bigger prices that I thought were definitely worthy of interest. Not absolute bets as yet, because I need to do a bit more work. But Have Secret for Richard Fahey, I thought was very, very interesting. Rarely runs a bad race, seems to handle all types of track, handles all kinds of ground, probably better on a bit of softer ground, actually. So if it did rain for him, that might be of benefit. He's handled Goodwood well in the past, so you'd hope that Epsom, those undulations should suit him. And I'd have him in the frame without a shadow of a doubt. Have Secret, and the other one at a much bigger price is Westerton for Alan King. He had a real barren year last year. Nothing went right. He went hurdling for a bit, which was a bit of a sort of cry for help, I think, in terms of where the horse was at. But these two runs back this season, when completely unconsidered in the market on both occasions, for me, they were chock full of promise about Westerton. I think it showed signs that he's getting back to the form that he was in 2 seasons ago, when he was pretty sharply progressive in some of these big sort of 10 furlong, mile and a half handicaps. And he again handles dig in the ground, so it won't matter which way the weather goes with him. And I thought, having looked at the Friday and probably both Friday and the Saturday, he was the one that jumped out to me as perhaps being the most overpriced that I could see at this stage. So he's one I'd be quite excited about at around about, well, I think you get 20 to 1 in one place and at least 16 to 1 everywhere else. So for those extra places, that would probably be a bet for me on Westerton.
I like that, because he again, when you say about the ground, we don't know how slow it's going to be. We'll obviously start to find that out, but it's definitely going to be on the easy side of good. How far they want to declare how soft it is officially compared to how slow it actually rides will be two different things, won't they? But you go back, he was definitely like a good 90s horse, wasn't he? So at 88, and like you say, there's a bit of a resurgence potentially in there. You need to see that in these horses, don't you? It's all well and good saying they're 2 stone lower than their mark from 2 years ago, because they're running to that level a lot of the times. But if you start to see a bit of the old spark in a horse, and then there's reasons, especially with the ground and stuff, to get interested in there. Westerton, 20 to 1. The other one was Have Secret, wasn't it? That's an 11 to 1 poke in there for Richard Fahey, Jane Gray. Like that, Will. Like I said, I still need to do a bit more work on the Friday stuff, so it would probably be a bit silly of me to cast too much of an opinion in there. But on the Saturday, there's loads of good racing. But on the Saturday, there was one that, this Prince Elizabeth Stakes, the first race that kicks off the 1 o'clock in the Group 3. You can make a case for loads of horses in here. It looks a nice competitive betting heat. It looks a nice competitive race. And it's the type of race where I look at it and even just at first glance, I think to myself, well, I think I can make enough of a case for at least a couple in here. It might be the type of race where I fancy playing 2 against the field. And I feel like in us having a conversation, if I spoke to multiple people, I think most people's shortlist of 2 would probably start to vary between a few horses. But then I sat down and thought about it, not even more logically, but just not even more seriously. But I just sat down and gave it the time that it deserves. I don't see how Royal Dress is not going to go off as a short price favourite of this. How short is, like, how long's a piece of string type stuff? But I can see this horse going off definitely as clear favourite. Was so unlucky in this race 12 months ago. For all that she was having to get rousted to still go, she got squished in a gap. She probably would have beat Breeze last year. I think she would have done. She is already a Group 3 winner. And where I mentioned about the fact that it is competitive, the market will tell you that, and there's plenty of horses you could have a chance to, you start to have questions about some of these horses, about how good they might be able to be. And then a lot of them just can't really answer that question. Like Serona, as much as I do like her, it just is very exposed, has probably achieved the same amount as a horse like Skellet, for example, that has got the potential to look quite good, but still hasn't quite done it in the right grades. Then you look at Bermuda Longtail, that's getting plenty of weights in there, but I just don't know about her on the slower ground. And as much as she's getting the weight in there, it's for a reason, isn't it? And I think Royal Dress was probably better coming into the race last year for the fact that she'd won a race, but I feel like they must have come back to this race with a reason. Like they want to come back because they think they want some sort of redemption for it. The fact that William Buick's been booked would add weight to my thought process that they are trying to target this race. And look, a comeback run wasn't really very good, because I think that as much as See the Fire's an aeroplane, the Godolphin horse that was second, Beautiful Love, I think it was, I tipped her up again last week, and she's just not as good as I thought she was. She still managed to rally and beat Royal Dress in the finish when she was weak as anything in the market. But at the end of the day, if that was just a prep run for this, then you don't really mind what they did in the time before. So I'm happy to draw a line through that. She's about 5-1. You can get top price 6-1 in places, and then there are some firms offering 4 places up for grabs in here. So it may be the case she has to get a bit lucky with her running again. But with someone like Will Buick on here, they're not going to make the same mistakes and get her boxed in like last year. I think she should definitely be clear favourite. She'd be one of my stronger fancies, because I think she's got a chance in the race. But then also when you add the weight of, I think she's a much bigger price than she should be. I'd have a 3-1, maybe even a 5-2 poke in this race. So garish to probably say, because she might get turned over by one of these maybe less exposed horses or horses with potential. But I think definitely at the price she looks like a good bet. Was this a race that you had a chance to have a glance at or any thought in, Will?
No. I must admit the Saturday I'm a bit bare on at the minute. I think once we've seen how Friday pans out, it might just form a few things in terms of draw and ground and what have you on Saturday. So stay tuned for those selections probably on Friday night or Saturday morning.
Well, definitely that, yeah. And that's the thing. That's why the final column that we put out is so important, because things can change between now and recording. Mostly, Will, the prices. That's why I wanted to get a bit excited about the first one. In the second race as well, the 135, the Group 3 bit, it's the boys' version, really, isn't it? I do like the fact that it's a matchup between Docklands and Persica, possibly. But Docklands, I think, is a bit of a rogue. I don't think he goes through with it. You look at what he does in like listed races and he'll get beat half a length. And then they put him in Group 1 races and he still sits with them, but he just gets exposed that he's not quite up to it. But he either runs in listed races or he runs in Group 1s. And when he runs in listed races, he's just always beaten like half a length. And I look at him and just think, I don't think he goes through with it. So he's in the Group 3 now, so obviously it's a bit more difficult than the listed races, but it's much easier than the Group 1s he's been in. He's massively got to be respected. Him and Persica, there's not too much between them, and Persica's given him £3. Ryan Moore's been booked. He won here, didn't he, when he beat Portsmouth in a handicap, and he looked like a good horse. There's loads of bits of form with Persica as well when you go back through some of the horses that he's run against and beaten that are now coming out and winning as well, like Iden a few weeks ago. So I can see him up there. I think he could potentially deserve to be a bit shorter, but I don't think I'd want to play even towards the front of it. The one that I want to give a mention to is Royal Playwright as an each-way potential bet in here. We've got 9 runners. All the firms are offering 3 places. No one's offering extended yet, but I wouldn't even be fussed about that because he gets bundles of weight in this race. I can't remember a 3-year-old winner of this particular race. I've gone back to like 1997, I think, to look. So I don't think there has been one, but there's been quite a few that have placed. I think 18 have run since 1997, 7 of them have placed. And if you look at the ones that have genuine form claims, I think it's like 7 of the 9 have actually placed. He's a top price 12-1 when we're recording this, which is why I want to give him a mention. He is as short as 8-1 in places as well. So he's another one of those that I give him a bit of a squeak. From a price perspective, if you can get 12-1 about him, then I think that's well worth an each-way play. If he starts getting down as short as 6 or 7-1 for the race, then I'd probably leave him alone and just have it as a bit of a watching brief. But definitely wanted to give him a mention nonetheless. The couple of handicaps that come out after, Will, the 3-year-old dash, and the actual dash, they're both just crazy lottery type races, aren't they? But for the fact that it's Derby Day, people will be watching and they might want a bit of a view on it. I promise that I won't be. I say I promise. I'll try my best to obviously try and find winners in these races, but I was really bullish on a horse in the dash last year. He was absolutely woeful. Like you could admit this, Will, surely. Like these 5 furlong sprints at Epsom, especially on the Derby mean, they've got to be one of the hardest races to ever possibly be able to predict the winner because it's so much down to luck, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the traffic problems you get. And particularly if the ground is on the soft side at Epsom as well, because they'll all want to be up on that stand side rail because of the camber. You know, it's a marked bias if it's soft ground at Epsom to stay as close to the stand side rail as you possibly can. So I think at least if we did know it was going to be, ground on the softer side, then we could certainly place that angle into things in terms of this particular race. And with that in mind, it's not categorical and not sort of cast iron by any stretch right now, but there's a couple that are drawn actually in 18 and 19 that I would have more than a second glance at wherever they were drawn, actually. Desert Cop, who's not been with George Baker all that long, and he campaigned him to run out in Bahrain, and he did well for him out there. Actually, he won a race and fared with credit on a couple of occasions. Handicap mark's gone up a bit as a result of that, but he's a horse that we know handles Epsom well enough to be a player. And the other one's Spartan Arrow, drawn right next to him as well for Archie Watson and Holly Doyle, who won on his penultimate start in first-time cheek pieces. he then just didn't have the rub of the green behind American Affair at York last time out. But given his two of his career wins have come at Goodwood and Epsom, he's clearly a horse that likes these sort of downhill undulating runs. So from a good draw, Spartan Arrow, and an ability to handle a bit of dig in the ground as well, I thought they were definitely of some interest, given they're drawn right up against a stand-side rail. It might well be that time will tell that they're proving to be really popular because of the ground and because of that draw angle. But right now you can get fairly decent prices about both of those. So I thought they were definitely of some kind of interest right now. Whether I'm going to suggest a full-on bet on them right now, that's not the case. But it might well be that at some stage I do.
Yeah, well, fair enough. And the key thing here is, Will, there'll be lots of, I'll have a place pot across the Derby. These are the legs. If you get through the 3-year-old and you get through the dash, I mean, as much as the races before that might look a formality, you want to be putting quite a few horses in here. So there's no harm in us disagreeing in the dash. The one that was on my short list, I've got as like a weird profile thing for the dash, which has found 3 qualifiers this century, and all 3 of them have won 25-1 winner, a 33-1 winner, and a 12-1 winner, I think it was. And every year there's a horse that might tick all the boxes, and then I've got to wait for the draw, and then they don't tick the box, or the weight changes a little bit. Vintage Clarets was that horse this year, drawn in 2, which isn't ideal in any way, shape, or form. Although I think the winning most stall in the dash this century is actually stall 1, or like the lowest one when there's non-runners in there. So if we could get the horse that's drawn in 1 out, then Vintage Clarets would redeem himself slightly. But that horse ticked loads of boxes in there in terms of age, the rating, like other profile bits in there. It wasn't jocked up at all this week, and then Warren Fentiman has been jocked up on him. And I know with these 5 furlong horses, they're not really very prolific, are they? But most of his wins have come when he's not been ridden by a claimer, and he's thrown in some howlers when he's had a claimer on top as well. And it's just that, isn't it? It's a lottery of the field. But like, he would be one that I'll still be sticking in my place pots. Haven't lost complete and utter faith. But if he was drawn in stall 13 or higher, just for the system bet, he would have been a bet. And then the other one that a good friend of mine's put me on to have a look at, ask me how he came out on not the qualified stuff, is Fair Wind, who's a horse that was favourite at Goodwood, wasn't he, when he refused to race. Then his last run last time, they just left him at the back. It very much just looked like a case of back at the race course, back with the view that this summer we might be able to win a pot with him. But you look at a couple of wins that he had either side of getting beat by American Affair, who's obviously a much better horse now. He just looks like a good horse, and I would have very little doubt that he is better than 93, but he's on that cusp of, if you're going to be a 5 furlong sprinter, you need to be like a stone better than he currently is. And I don't think he's got that much up his sleeve, but if his attitude's a bit better with him this season, he's got an all right draw from 13. The negative with him in this race, because it's the fastest 5 furlongs in the world, isn't it, is he's going to be ridden from the back. But the positive in that instance, where I'd rather shape it as in a glass half full type person, is that horses that need to smash the gates, get out and lead, they can't all do that. Only 1 or 2 horses can actually get out in front. Whereas a hold-up horse doesn't really matter unless they obviously get hampered or like it can significantly happen. Obviously, the problem with that is they've then got to get the gaps and all those things in there. But in a race like this, everyone needs a little bit of luck. So why can't Fair Wind get a bit of it? So at least there's 4 horses for the play spot in there. And then just so we can wrap this up, Will, not quickly, but just so we can make sure that it's not going on for too long, I'm going to quickly go back to the dash for a second, because there was one that needs to be mentioned in there, I think. Even this one looks a bit more obvious. Ruby's Prophet is like a greyhound out the stall. She loves popping out and doing things. She's favourite for this race, and I do massively respect her. But Mademoiselle, I thought, ran really well behind her last time out, when she's a horse that does really need to lead to show her best, I think. She's made all in most of her races before that, where she's run quite well. I'm not saying they were definitely plotting her for like this is a target race, but the 3-year-old dash is a race that's worth a few quid. It's on the Derby meeting. We know with Ammo Racing, they've had places in the Derby as well. I look at this horse when in Thirsk, Moorland won a race. And when Moorland won that race in Thirsk, I was very impressed, but I liked the front 2 there. And the front 2 was Mademoiselle and Moorland. She had like excuses after. She came up against some really good horses in a nice class 2 at Beverley. Then tactically, she wasn't ridden with the best authority in a couple of other races. And then they put her in a handicap where she ran okay. And she's up £10 since that handicap. But I do feel like as a 3-year-old, she's going to be a much better horse. She does need to go out and ping. She's only about 13-2, so relatively short in there. But she's probably got a bad draw as well, because she's in 5 and that Ruby's Prophet's in 18. But I feel like Mademoiselle's a horse that this season could win something nice. And why couldn't it be the dash for the 3-year-olds on Saturday. The other stuff after the Derby, well, I've not got stuck into yet. I don't know if you've got an opinion on any of those, or whether we should just wrap it up there and let the viewers go about their Thursday.
I've got one very quick thought on the 5 o'clock, which is a 10 furlong 3-year-old 0 to 100 handicap. And the top weight is actually only rated 89. So it's not as classy a renewal as can sometimes, or they would hope would be the case. And a horse that put in a clear career best on seasonal debut and first start since being gelded at Goodwood last time out was Grecian Legacy. And it's interesting that off the mark of 80 now, they're happy to throw Grecian Legacy into a valuable race here that has now turned out to not be as classy as perhaps they might have first envisaged. He did really well to win at Goodwood that day. He had to chart a path right down on the far side rail when every winner on the round course that day at Goodwood was coming wide and up the centre of the track. And Grecian Legacy was the one horse that went down onto what was probably slightly slower ground, maybe towards the far side rail. And he fairly sprinted to the front. Didn't do much once he hit the front, but the impression was there that, this is a horse who has come back in really good heart. I think the gelding operation and a bit of time to mature, I think he's going to make up into a really good three-year-old middle distance handicapper. And he's not priced up as yet this race, I don't think. So much will depend on what price he is. I mean, if he's 11-4 favourite, then that's probably what he should be. So hopefully he's not. Don't tell anyone.
Hills have just priced up, so not that anyone can really get on them. But they've gone 5-1 as a second favourite in there. They've only gone 3 places at the moment, 10 runners in there, but it's probably going to be in and around the realms of an okay-ish price, isn't it? It might not see too many people steaming at that price, so he might get a little bit bigger before the Will Smith money goes down. Right. Thank you so much for your time on this one. We'll be back relatively soon from a turnaround on this YouTube channel. So we'll come back to give our thoughts on Royal Ascot, which is, Will, it's so close. It's the Derby this weekend. We get a week's break and then it's Royal Ascot. So lots of exciting things coming up. Like I say, these are 2 classics. And regardless of the fact there doesn't seem to be as much hype or excitement about the Derby as there used to be, I feel like especially with social media worlds out there, like I haven't seen an advert on the actual TV for the Derby. Not that I watch much TV, but my mum normally messages me and says, "Oh, isn't the Derby thing good?" Or like when the Cheltenham preview comes out, she's like, "Oh yeah, Cheltenham's coming. I've just an advert for it." Don't know what it's like on the undergrounds and all that sort of stuff in London, but it never loses its luster when it comes to the day. When you watch it, if you've ever been to the Derby, it's still like an amazing day. There's some cracking racing and good horses going in and around there. So I'm excited about it. We'll get those final selections out on the website, so you can click the link in the description to see those. But once again, thank you, Will. Thank you all at home for watching. If you've stayed this far and you haven't already subscribed, but you can and you want to, please do so. Drop a like on the video because it's nice to be nice, isn't it? And we will see you all again very soon.